The knock came again, harder this time, echoing through the quiet house like a demand. Emma's heart thudded painfully against her ribs. She exchanged a glance with Daniel, his expression now alert, protective. As if he was ready to shield her from whatever waited on the other side, Emma hesitated at the door, her hand trembling on the knob. She pulled it open slowly, breath caught in her throat. Standing on the porch was her ex-husband, Mark. Emma froze. Of all the people she expected, neighbors, a delivery driver, maybe even a friend, he was the last face she wanted to see. His tall frame filled the doorway, his jaw tight, his eyes carrying that familiar mix of regret and arrogance she knew too well. "Emma," Mark said, his voice rough, almost rehearsed. "We need to talk." Her chest constricted. Behind her, Daniel straightened, his presence solid and steady, but his jaw flexed, its eyes narrowing as he looked at Mark. Emma's voice wavered. "Mark, it's late. This isn't the time." But Mark stepped forward slightly, ignoring Daniel's silent warning. "I've made mistakes, I know that. But I've been thinking, maybe we could try again. You don't belong in this old house alone. I miss you." The words struck like a blow. For years, Emma had begged for those exact sentences, had waited through long nights for him to admit he was wrong, to come back. And now, when her heart was finally stitching itself back together, here he was offering the very things she once thought she wanted. Her breath came shallow. She felt Daniel's presence behind her like an anchor, grounding her in the storm. She glanced back at him. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, steady, quiet, unwavering, spoke volumes. He wasn't going to interfere, wasn't going to speak for her. The choice was hers. Emma turned back to Mark. For a moment, her voice failed. Memories rushed in, holidays spent laughing, the night he walked out, the months she spent picking up the pieces, the love, the betrayal, the silence. Finally, she found her voice. "Mark, you can't just come back here and act like nothing happened. You left, you broke us, and I had to learn how to live without you." Mark's eyes softened, his shoulders slumping. "I made mistakes. But people change. I've changed. Don't you think we deserve another chance?" The ache in her chest was real, but it wasn't longing, it was clarity. She had waited so long to hear those words, but now she realized they came too late. She had already started moving forward, even if it scared her. Emma shook her head slowly, tears burning her eyes. "No, Mark. I deserve better than waiting for you to remember me when it's convenient. I deserve someone who chooses me every day." The silence that followed was thick, heavy. Mark looked at her, his face hardening as if he couldn't believe she had said no. He glanced at Daniel, his jaw tightening. "So this is about him, isn't it?" Emma swallowed, glancing back at Daniel. His eyes met hers, steady, supportive. He wasn't pushing her, wasn't pulling her, just standing by her side. She turned back to Mark, her voice firm. "This isn't about him. It's about me. And I'm finally choosing myself." Mark's expression flickered anger, then defeat. He opened his mouth as if to argue, but no words came. Finally, with a bitter shake of his head, he turned and walked down the porch steps. Disappearing into the night, the door clicked shut behind her, the silence that followed almost deafening. Emma leaned back against the door, her legs trembling, tears slipping down her cheeks. Daniel stepped closer, his voice gentle. "Are you okay?" Emma nodded weakly, wiping her face. "I don't know. Maybe for the first time in years, I actually am." He didn't say anything. Just watched her with that same steady gaze that had been her lifeline all evening. His presence was enough. Finally, Emma let out a shaky laugh, half in relief, half in disbelief. "I thought you came here to fix my sink." Daniel smiled softly, stepping close enough that his warmth wrapped around her like a blanket. "Maybe I came to fix something else, too." Her heart pounded, but this time not from fear. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine the possibility of something new. Something gentle, something real. She met his eyes, her voice trembling. "Daniel, I don't know where this will lead. I'm scared, but I don't feel alone when you're here. His hand lifted slowly, brushing against hers again, this time with more certainty. "And don't be alone anymore. We don't have to figure it all out tonight. We just have to take the first step." Emma swallowed hard, her tears giving way to something else, hope. It was fragile, trembling like a newborn flame, but it was there. She nodded, her lips curling into the faintest smile. The first step. Daniel squeezed her hand, his smile steady. "We'll take it together." The kitchen was quiet again, but not with loneliness this time. The silence was full, warm, alive. The sound of the repaired sink dripping no more felt like a quiet symbol of something mended. Something healed. Emma looked at Daniel, realizing that while he had come to fix a leak, he had done something far greater. He had reminded her that her heart was still capable of beating, still capable of being seen, still capable of love. And for the first time in years, Emma didn't just feel okay, she felt ready to live again. Daniel's eyes softened. "Sometimes we get so used to loneliness we forget we don't have to carry it forever." The words hit her like a quiet truth. She swallowed, her throat dry. Part of her wanted to dismiss it, to push the conversation back to safer ground. But another part, the one that had been longing for connection, didn't want to let go of the moment. She met his gaze, holding it this time. "Do you ever get tired of it?" The quiet. Daniel didn't look away. Every day, the admission hung between them, raw and vulnerable. Emma's breath caught, her chest tightening in ways she hadn't expected. For so long, she had believed she was the only one carrying that kind of weight. To hear it in his voice, to see it in his eyes, made her feel less invisible, less alone. They sat like that for a long moment. Two people bound not by words, but by the shared ache of understanding. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. He leaned forward slightly, his voice low but steady. "Emma, there's something I've been meaning to tell you for a while now." Her pulse quickened instantly. His tone was different. Not casual, not neighborly. There was something in it that made her heart race. Her stomach twist with nervous anticipation. She tried to steady her breath, but the room suddenly felt smaller, warmer. She gripped her mug, though her hands trembled. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel looked at her. Really looked, as though searching for permission in her eyes before speaking. His lips parted slightly, but he hesitated, the weight of his words pressing heavily between them. Emma's mind raced. She didn't know what he was about to say, but deep down, she sensed it was something that could change everything. And in that moment, with the silence stretching long and fragile, she realized she wasn't just waiting for his words, she was afraid of how much she wanted to hear them. The kitchen light hummed softly above them, the only sound besides the faint tick of the wall clock. Emma sat frozen, her coffee untouched, her fingers tight around the mug as if letting go might break the fragile moment. Daniel's words lingered in the air, half-spoken, heavy with meaning. "I've been meaning to tell you something." He hadn't looked away since, and Emma wasn't sure if she wanted him to. His gaze held her in place, steady, unwavering, as though he had finally decided to stop hiding behind polite nods and neighborly smiles. Her heart thudded in her chest. For years she had walked through life expecting nothing more than quiet routines and the occasional small talk with people like Daniel. But tonight felt different. Something in his tone suggested the ground beneath her was about to shift. Emma took a shaky breath. "Daniel, what is it?" He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. His hands folded together tightly, betraying a nervousness she had never seen in him before. For a man who seemed so calm, so steady, the tension in his shoulders was startling. "When I first moved here," he began slowly, his voice low and deliberate, "I didn't know anyone. It was just me and an empty house. I was starting over, in more ways than one. And then you showed up at my door with that plate of cookies. I still remember the way you smiled, even though I could tell you were tired. You don't know how much that small gesture meant to me." Emma blinked, surprised. I didn't think it was a big deal. Just something neighbors do." Daniel shook his head gently. "It was more than that. To me, it felt like the first sign that maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. Since then, I've noticed you. The way you carry yourself. The way you keep going, even when it's clear you're carrying a lot. Emma, I've seen strength in you that you probably don't even realize you have." Her chest tightened. No one had said anything like that to her in years. She wanted to dismiss it, laugh it off, but the sincerity in his eyes made it impossible. "Daniel," she whispered, her throat dry. He hesitated, his fingers tapping lightly against the mug. Then he exhaled as if letting go of something he'd been holding inside. "I care about you. More than I probably should. More than just a neighbor. I've wanted to tell you for a long time, but I didn't know if it was fair to you or to me. But sitting here tonight, I can't keep it to myself anymore." Emma's pulse raced. The words hung in the air like a fragile thread, pulling her in yet terrifying her at the same time. She hadn't expected this, hadn't let herself imagine it. Her first instinct was to retreat, to push the feeling away before it could take root. She shook her head slightly, her voice trembling. "Daniel, I don't know if I can do this. My heart-teat's been broken before. I'm not sure I could go through that again." His expression softened, though his eyes never wavered. "I'm not asking you to rush into anything. I just needed you to know how I feel. Whatever you choose, I'll respect it." The room seemed to shrink around them. Emma's breath came faster, her body tense with the battle inside her. She wanted to believe him, to lean into the warmth he offered. But the scars of her past still ached like fresh wounds. She stared at her hands, searching for something to say. "You don't understand. After the divorce, I told myself I'd never let anyone in again. It's easier that way, safer." Daniel's voice was gentle but firm. "Safer doesn't always mean happier." His words pierced through her walls, making her chest ache. She swallowed hard, unable to stop the tears that threatened to rise. She hadn't cried in front of anyone in years, but something about Daniel's presence made it harder to keep the mask in place. He noticed, his brow furrowing as he reached across the table. His fingers brushed against hers light, tentative, as if asking permission. Emma froze. Her first instinct was to pull away. But she didn't. The warmth of his touch seeped into her skin, traveling up her arm and settling deep inside her chest. It felt dangerous, this closeness, but it also felt alive. Her voice cracked. "I don't know if I can trust myself again. What if I make the same mistakes?" Daniel's hand stayed steady against hers. "Then you'll learn. And if you fall, maybe this time you won't have to get up alone." The tears finally broke free, slipping down her cheeks before she could stop them. She covered her face with her free hand, embarrassed, but Daniel didn't let go. His thumb moved gently against her knuckles, grounding her in the moment. After a long silence, Emma lowered her hand, her eyes still wet. "You make it sound so simple." He gave a faint smile, his own eyes glistening as though he carried his own hidden pain. "It's not simple. It's just worth it." Emma's heart pounded wildly. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let herself hope, but fear clawed at her from the inside. She had spent so long protecting herself that the idea of opening up again felt almost impossible. And yet, sitting across from Daniel, feeling the steady warmth of his hand on hers, she realized something. For the first time in years, she didn't feel completely broken. She felt seen, her lips parted, the words trembling on the edge. "Daniel, I..." But before she could finish, a loud knock echoed at the door, startling them both. Emma jumped, her heart leaping into her throat. Daniel pulled his hand back slightly, his eyes flickering with something unreadable. The knock came again firm. Impatient, Emma's pulse raced. At this hour, she wasn't expecting anyone. She rose slowly, her chair scraping against the floor, uncertainty twisting in her stomach. Daniel stood as well, his expression protective now, his jaw set. Neither of them knew it yet. But that knock would change the course of the night, perhaps the course of their lives. The kitchen was too quiet, except for the rhythmic dripping under the sink. Each drop hit the metal bowl she had shoved there earlier, and the hollow sound echoed in the stillness of the house. Emma stood with her arms wrapped around herself, staring at the slow leak as though it were a reminder of everything she had left undone. The house was old, her grandmother's place, left to her after the divorce. It was supposed to be a new beginning, a place to heal, but most days it just felt like a space too big for one woman to fill. She had painted the walls, replaced curtains, and tried to bring life back into it. But no matter what she did, the silence always crept back in. The drip of the sink seemed louder tonight, almost taunting her. She had told herself for weeks that she would call a plumber, but life always got in the way. Work, bills, loneliness, one excuse after another. And the truth was, she didn't really want a stranger walking into her home. Seeing how messy her world had become, how messy she had become, she sighed, bent down, and tightened the old rag wrapped around the pipe. It helped for a few seconds, then another bead of water slipped through, shining in the dim kitchen light. Her patience broke, and she pushed the rag away with a frustrated groan. That was when she heard the knock. It startled her sharp against the quiet. For a moment, she considered not answering. It was late enough that visitors felt unusual, and she wasn't exactly in the mood for company. But the knock came again, gentler this time, almost patient. She wiped her damp hands on her jeans and walked to the door. When she opened it, her heart skipped. Daniel stood there holding a small toolbox in one hand. He was her neighbor, the man who had moved in about 3 years ago. They had exchanged pleasantry cellos in the driveway. Brief chats about trash pickup days or the weather, but nothing more. He was kind, steady, the type of man who mowed his lawn every Saturday morning like clockwork. Emma had always thought of him as reliable, safe, the kind of neighbor people wanted. He smiled, not the broad kind that strangers gave, but a soft one that felt strangely personal. "Hey, Emma," he said. "I couldn't help but notice your sink's been giving you trouble, hasn't it?" She blinked, caught off guard. "What?" He held up the toolbox. "I was outside earlier. Heard the drip through the open window. Figured I could help, if you don't mind." Emma hesitated. She should have felt embarrassed that her neighbor could hear her leaking sink from his yard. But instead, she felt something else. Relief. As though life had finally thrown her a lifeline. Even if it came in the form of Daniel with his toolkit. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice softer than she meant it to be. "I don't want to bother you. You're not bothering me," he said icily. "Honestly, I could use something to do. And besides, I've fixed my share of leaks." She stepped aside, opening the door wider. "Well, if you're sure." Daniel entered, his presence filling the small space. He set the toolbox on the counter and crouched beneath the sink without hesitation, as though he had done this 1,000 times before. Emma stood by awkwardly, unsure of what to do with her hands. Watching the way he moved, calm, deliberate. Confident, there was something grounding about him. Something steady that contrasted sharply with the storm of thoughts always swirling in her head. "You caught it just in time," Daniel said as he twisted a wrench with ease. "Another few weeks, and you would have had a real mess on your hands." Emma leaned against the counter, folding her arms. "Story of my life," she muttered without thinking. Daniel glanced up briefly, curiosity flickering in his eyes, but he didn't press. He returned to his work, and Emma let out a slow breath. The truth was, she wasn't used to letting people in. Since her divorce, she had built walls so high that even she had trouble climbing over them. Friends had stopped calling after too many declined invitations. Family lived far away, and she always convinced them she was fine when they checked in. She had grown used to managing things alone, even if it meant struggling with a leaking sink for weeks now. Watching Daniel quietly fix what she couldn't, she felt something shift. Not just in her kitchen, but inside her. She studied him more closely. He had always seemed younger than his years, though she guessed he was close to her age late 30s, maybe early 40s. His dark hair had begun to gray at the edges, and there was a strength in his shoulders that spoke of someone who had carried his own burdens. But it wasn't his looks that held her, it was the calm energy he carried. It's the way he seemed to fit so naturally into her space. "Almost done," he said, tightening the last piece. "You'll want to check it for a few days, but this should hold." Emma bent slightly, peering over his shoulder at the pipe. "You make it look easy." Daniel gave a small chuckle. "Everything's easier when you've had practice. Fixing things just comes with life, I guess." There was something in his tone that made Emma pause. It was simple enough, but it carried weight test if he wasn't just talking about pipes when he stood. Wiping his hands on a rag, Emma felt the space between them differently now. The kitchen seemed warmer, the air thicker. She found herself searching for words, not ready for him to leave. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Really? I've been putting this off for too long." Daniel leaned lightly against the counter, his eyes steady on hers. "You don't always have to wait until things fall apart, Emma. Sometimes. It's okay to ask for help sooner." Her breath caught. He said it casually, like a neighbor giving friendly advice, but the truth of it settled deep in her chest. Because he was right. She had been waiting, holding everything together until it broke her marriage. Her heart, her sense of self. She forced a small smile. "I'll try to remember that." They stood in silence for a moment. The sound of the dripping gone, the kitchen unusually still. Emma realized that the problem she had dreaded facing all evening was now fixed. But what lingered wasn't relief about the sink. It was something else, something that stirred quietly between them. Unspoken but undeniable. Daniel picked up his toolbox, breaking the silence. "I'll let you get back to your night." But before he reached the door, Emma found herself blurting out, "Would you like some coffee? I mean, since you went through all that trouble." He paused, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "Coffee sounds good." And just like that, what began as a simple fix was turning into something Emma hadn't expected: a conversation, a connection. Maybe even the start of something she didn't yet have words for. As she moved toward the coffee pot, her heart beat faster than it had in years, as though it too had been waiting for a reason to come alive again. The aroma of fresh coffee filled the small kitchen, wrapping the room in a kind of comfort Emma hadn't realized she needed. She moved carefully, almost nervously, as she poured the steaming liquid into 2 mismatched mugs. It struck her then how long it had been since she had made coffee. For someone other than herself. She set the mugs on the table, suddenly self-conscious of the scratches on its wooden surface, the slightly chipped rim of one cup. Daniel didn't seem to notice. He took the seat across from her, his shoulders relaxed, toolbox resting by his feet. For the first time in years, her kitchen didn't feel empty. They sat quietly at first. The silence stretching, broken only by the clink of ceramic when she stirred in sugar. Emma usually hated silence. It always reminded her of the nights after her husband left, when the house seemed to echo with everything unsaid. But this silence was different. It wasn't cold or heavy. It was thick with something unspoken, something waiting. Daniel sipped his coffee, eyes meeting hers briefly before shifting away. "You know," he said slowly, "that sink was an easy fix. But if you'd left it, it could have gotten worse. You don't have to wait until things get that bad before you do something about it." His words landed with more weight than he probably intended. Emma let out a small laugh, though it came out shakier than she'd hoped. "I guess I've gotten used to patching things up until they finally break." Daniel tilted his head, studying her. He didn't speak right away, and Emma felt her cheeks warm under his quiet gaze. Finally, he said softly, "That sounds like more than just a sink." Her throat tightened. She looked down at her coffee, stirring it, though the sugar had long dissolved. "Maybe," she murmured. It wasn't often that Emma opened up. Most people never saw past her polite smile and small talk. But something about Daniel's presence felt disarming. He wasn't pushing, wasn't demanding answers. But his steady silence made her feel safe enough to admit truths she usually kept locked away. She set her spoon down, taking a deep breath. "I used to think I had everything figured out. A home, a marriage, a plan. And then it all fell apart. Now it feels like I'm just holding everything together with duct tape and hope." Daniel leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable but kind. "Life does that sometimes. Throws everything at you all at once." He paused, then added, "But you're still here." That says something. Emma's chest tightened again. But this time it wasn't panic, was something gentler, like a reminder she hadn't allowed herself to feel. She looked at him, really looked, and noticed the faint lines around his eyes. The way his jaw tightened briefly before softening again. She wondered what stories he carried behind that calm exterior. She wanted to ask, but hesitated. It felt too soon, too personal. Instead, she said lightly, "You sound like someone who's been through a few storms yourself."